What's up, brand builders? Stephen Hurahan here on the Brand Master podcast, and in this episode, I'm joined by Mr. Peter Wilken, a brand strategy veteran with serious chops and the author of Dim Sum Strategy, Bite-Sized Tools to Build Stronger Brands. Now, Peter is the real deal when it comes to branding, and he's been in the branding game at the very, very top. He's led global agency giants such as BBDO, Burnett and Ogilvy, to name just a few. He's also worked with the biggest brands in the world, including Coke, McDonald's, Disney, Pepsi, and BMW as well. And he's the winner of the coveted Cannes Golden Lion Award, also known as the Oscars of advertising. Today, Peter shares his wisdom on what brand DNA is, top methods to help clients find their DNA, and his favorite brand strategy tools as well. So if you want to learn applicable techniques and tools used by an industry veteran for the world's biggest brands, then stick around for this episode of the Brand Master Podcast.
Welcome to the Brand Master Podcast, a show specialized in helping branding professionals and entrepreneurs to build brands using strategy, psychology, and creative thinking.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Brand Master Podcast. And I'm absolutely delighted to have Mr. Peter Wilken on with me today. Peter, I've just given our audience a little bit of an insight as to the journey that you've come from, where you've been, and the caliber of brands that you've worked with. So first and foremost, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today.
Well, no, thank you, Stephen. It's absolutely my pleasure to be here, and hopefully I can provide a few nuggets of value.
Absolutely. I'm absolutely convinced that you will. I've got no doubt. Now, although I have given an introduction to our audience, and some of them will probably have known who you are as well. They might have read your book, Dim Sum Strategy, which we'll speak about later on. But for those who don't know you, why don't you give us a bit of a 5-minute journey as to where you've come from and how you've gotten to where you are today?
Okay. Yeah, and I will try and limit it to 5 minutes because
it's a big journey. It's a big you'll be doing well to squeeze it in.
No, I mean you can talk a lot about yourself. So my background was advertising. So my last kind of corporate role was running BBDO Asia Pacific out of Hong Kong. So I looked after their 14 markets. And before that, I had 11 years at Ogilvy, kind of the University of Advertising, starting in London, and then running their outfits in Manila and elsewhere. And then 5 years running Burnett Southeast Asia before I joined BBDO. So the advertising world was fantastic because it kind of gave you this smorgasbord of different clients and cultures to work with. So I was, so privileged and lucky to work with a whole host of different blue chip brands in different cultural environments, and I had a ball. I didn't really know what I wanted to do at university, and people ask, how did you get into advertising? It sounds trite, but it was like easy because it was about the only thing that I was naturally good at. I couldn't see myself doing anything else. And I had a real ball doing that. We had a fantastic run in starting in the first agency that I ran in Ogilvy, Philippines, and I was kind of given the task there to pick up and hope recover a small agency that then within the Ogilvy network was struggling by Ogilvy standards. And we managed with my creative partner to do an amazing turnaround job. And that was really largely because of the fantastic team we had assembled. And because we followed some of our own principles, we were very focused in being positioned as out and out creative leaders within the market. At the time, the Philippines had plenty of creative talent, but had never actually even won an international award. I inherited an agency which was small, 40, 50 people, that had 75% of its revenue on one client. The previous owners were sidelined on drug trafficking charges. The reputation wasn't great. The only way was up, and I think they thought, well, this young 33-year-old or whatever it was, if he screws it up, we haven't got that too much to lose. And as I said, I had a terrific partner, a chap called David Guerrero, who's still there, and BBDO Guerrero is one of the top creative agencies in the Philippines now. And we had a pact, and we said, out and out, we will make sure that the work comes first, and we will be the creative leaders in the market. And we had the support of Neil French, who was the worldwide creative director, and we ended up doing some amazing work. That sounds very conceited, and we'll perhaps get a chance to explain that a little later. So anyway, that's where the reputation started. We ended up, after 3 years, having kind of trebled the size of the agency, having won more international creative awards than everyone but two of the agencies in the Ogilvy network. We won more than New York and London, so it turned some heads, and we got noticed. And Martin Sorrell, then when Ogilvy's was acquired, kind of used us as a what he called his foxhole to experiment with different ways of doing business. And so it rolled on from there, and I ended up going and running Burnett's, then eventually BBDO, and that's probably where I hit my glass ceiling of incompetence. And, and instead of having the fun of actually running a decent sized agency, I think Gladwell says the magic number of nodding acquaintances around about 120. So that it's a function of brain size, so. After us, funnily enough, it's dolphins, who can have the most number of associations with humans, around about 120. If you're a super connector, you can double that. But those are the kind of number of acquaintances that you can nod with and establish a personal relationship, and why some companies actually bud at that size. But when it started getting bigger than that, it's very difficult to maintain a direct relationship. And I didn't enjoy so much the political side of running a big corporate role where you spent your life on a plane, pressing flesh and trying to massage big egos in Chicago and New York and London and Brazil and elsewhere. Anyway, so I left BBDO and set up.
So what year was this, and where did you go to from there?
Oh, it's getting back there now. Gosh, I'm an old timer. This was nearly 20 years ago. It would have been in 2001, 2002. I set up the brand company. Whilst I was running BBDO Asia Pacific, that was 9/11. That was the time the world changed. And everyone knows in a recession or a crash, advertising and champagne are the first things to go. And of course, advertising went. And but it was also a huge opportunity to reinvent. And whilst I'd been doing that role, people had always said, Peter, advertising's fun, but when are you going to get a real job, kind of thing. And I'd always said you should be setting up your own agency, and that's what we did. We set up the brand company. I set it up with a couple of partners, Ian Henry, who was then the Hong Kong Young Entrepreneur of the Year, and he'd kind of made himself a multi-squillionaire at the age of 26 on the back of China.com, and lost most of it at the age of 28, as you do as an entrepreneur. And a fantastic, smart marketing guy called James Stewart, who was running Li Ka-shing's top telco group. And between us, what we'd identified was that there was millions and millions and millions of dollars being spent on what we called the superficial packaging of brands. And with due respect, because I know a lot of the people listening here are graphic designers on that side, it doesn't mean it's not important, but it was things like visual identity, logos, and to a large extent the communications and ad campaigns I've been spending my last 20 years doing, but not on the substance of what drives perceptions of your brand, which is the actual experience of what you're delivering in terms of your product and service. And we identified that there were tons of tools to be able to articulate strategy for your brands, how you position it, but it was always being directed towards the superficial side, not the substance. So we set up the brand company, and we developed a process which was trademark called brand-centered management. And it basically said, if your brand is what you wish to stand for in your customers' minds, a territory that you own in the mind, and you can articulate that in a way that is crisp but very rich in terms of character. So, like defining it like a human kind of DNA, really. why would you not want to put that at the center of everything that your organization does and says? So in fact, what we thought, or what people thought was just a brand specialist company and, come in and help with our communications and do logo, in fact wasn't. It was a change management company with the brand at the center of change management. And so am I running out of my 5 minutes? Because I mean, the nice end of the story was, I kind of, I ended up, working from this little dark basement in Hong Kong. We couldn't afford more than one room, the three of us, when we were there starting out. But and I could look up and see in this high-rise tower where my Gordon Gekko Power Corner office used to be, running the big ad agency. I'd given the keys to the Porsche back, and I was catching the bus in. And like you had young kids and thinking, oh my God, what have I done, kind of thing, and is this going to work?
The glamorous life had come and gone, and you were on the opposite side of the hill.
Absolutely. If you're at all like me, you really enjoy life when it's there, and you didn't. Saving as a concept, you surf the wave in front of you, and hope the next one's going to be a good one.
Well, the thing that stuck out really the most to me of what you said there, of course, apart from that, glorious journey that you went on working with these massive agencies and these big brands as well, which you didn't even get a chance to talk to in the minimal 5 minutes that I gave you, was the idea of this superficial level branding versus substance level branding. And that's a concept that just it immediately speaks to me, because that's also something that is super important to me, that I came across many years ago when I was looking at how I could do different things differently, what real branding was, and the way you've articulated it there, although they were different words in terms of superficial branding versus substance branding, it is the same thing to me, which is the visual brand versus the strategy. And so many people get sucked into the visuals of the brand because they are the things that we're so familiar with within our lives, the Nike logo, the Apple logo, the visual identities, these visual cues and assets that we see, the contour bottle of Coke, but these are all visual cues. These are all the surface level, and beneath that you have the strategy. So why don't you talk to us about what strategy, or that substance that you call it, means to you?
Yeah, sure. And I just want to, before all your incredibly talented graphic designers and people who are doing these logos and ideas, turn off and say, who is this guy? I don't mean superficial in a derogatory way at all. I rather mean it was being done back to front. So clients would say we need to rebrand, and we do. And what they would kind of mean was that we think we need the tangible side of a new logo. They don't know where their money is going, but they can touch a logo and a redesign. And it's hugely important, we feel, to bring creative ideas to life and express and drive them, but it should come at the end of the process, not at the beginning. So understanding who you are, what you stand for, and why, and really being able to identify the insight and the opportunity for your brand should come way before you've actually created the clothes that you wear. And what I liken the identity to doing that to how you dress. I could walk into a room, with my brand new kind of suit that my wife would have picked from me and say, look at me, I'm Peter, I'm stylish. And, and people will say, no, we know you, Peter, you're British and you're not stylish. You're not going to get away with it. So you play to who you are. So, but I love that. And that's something that I talk about often, which is the human brand philosophy, that we're building an entity to connect with other humans. And in doing that, you need to make your brand as relatable as possible. And I like the analogy that you've just used there. If you want to dress the part, then you have to know the context of the room that you're walking into, because if you walk into a room with a beautiful suit on, then you're only going to be received
based on the people that are in there. If you walk into a room full of bikies with tattoos, then you're not part of their tribe, and you're not going to appeal to them. So that superficial stuff is only based on the substance of the meaning that you want to represent to your audience. Anyway, I don't want to cut you off with your answer to what brand strategy.
No. Yeah, because I was going to illustrate. You mentioned a couple of things: Nike swoosh and the Coke contour bottle. And I mean, when good design comes in, becomes an integral part of your brand as well. I mean, you may not know, or people may know the story that Phil Knight famously rejected the swoosh when it first came out. He hated it. He thought it was too simplistic and didn't like it, and only kind of got it because he was penny pinching. And of course, now it's absolutely symbolic of the positive attitude and spirit of what Nike stands for. It's an integral part of it. The Coke contour bottle. I'm old enough to have gone right back to the days when Coke was still primarily distributed in the beautiful glass recycled bottles. And when PET came in, they were faced with this dilemma because they wanted to get out of it, but they had this iconic contour shape, which everybody knew. And the bean counters had done all their numbers and said, look, no, we just want to do the plain sided bottles and things like this. It's much, much cheaper. It's more efficient. Surface area to volume ratio, packing rates, distribution costs will save millions of dollars doing that. We were actually integral in saying, no, don't do that. Pay the extra money. Do the contour shape in PET and retain it, because that is absolutely an integral asset part of your brand.
Absolutely.
So sorry, I've forgotten the other part of the question.
It really is getting to the bottom of what brand strategy is to you, and then how that leads to the brand's DNA in terms of knowing who you are first and foremost before going out and communicating it to the world.
Right. No, absolutely. Okay. So, I mean, brand strategy, and it's these terms are so broadly used now. So I'll just tell you what it means to me. Brand strategy is brand plus strategy. So a brand to me is a territory in the mind. That's all it is. It's a perception. It's what you stand for in the minds of your customers or your stakeholders. But it's the most powerful thing of all, because it drives action and behavior and that perception. So if you can articulate that and shape that, and you've got to believe that as marketers and brand builders we can, then you can have an enormous impact on your business and the relationship that your customers have with your brand. The second part is strategy, and strategy for me is very simple. The strategy is choices. So brand strategy together is, what is the territory in the mind that you're planning to build? What choices are you making in order to build those? And that means what you decide not to do and not to own, and what you decide to clearly own. And the more focused you can be on what you own, the better. It goes a little bit more beyond that. There is, I had an interesting conversation with a young aspiring brand strategist, super bright guy, just starting out, 26, 27, 28, something like that. And he said, Peter, I love what you're talking about the brand DNA and things, but I don't feel I've got permission to kind of challenge my clients on their business strategy. That's theirs. And I said, why is that? Because I do not draw a distinction between brand and business. And the best businesses, the CEOs are actually CBOs, they're chief brand officers. And there's a whole new breed of that, particularly in the West Coast, when we're looking at the Facebooks, the Googles, the Teslas, those, they are very much believers in driving from their business, from their brand. So brand strategy and business strategy and communication strategy, if you like, are absolutely integral, and they're integrated. I find them very difficult to stand apart, and this is where the kind of DNA comes in, and I'll fill that in a minute. And the third part of brand strategy for me is that people kind of still think of it as a document. Here's a paper plan, let's go and we'll just draft it. I don't think of it that way. I think of brand strategy as a journey, and as a relationship, and on a journey you need both a compass and a map. So the map is the plan. You've got something written, you know, a destination. But for me, a compass is far more valuable, especially in a storm and in turbulent waters, an unpredictable world of change. A compass will always point you to true north, and be a guiding beacon or a star. And that's what a DNA is to me. A brand DNA is that. It's a guiding beacon or a star, like its genetic counterpart. It's a template for replicating consistent desired future experiences. And so we spent a lot of time, and this was, you know, way before Simon Sinek did a brilliant job of, you know, owning why. We identified 4 components of what a DNA was. And those were, you know, the role that you play, your raison d'etre. Why do you exist? You know, what is it that you believe in? Your overarching commitment or your promise. You know, the overarching commitment to your stakeholders that you will deliver against. The benefit that they derive from you successfully delivering against that promise, and how you go about doing it. Your culture, your manners, and those kind of 4 elements. There's a kind of 5th bit, which is the icons and attributes that you champion and use to trigger associations with it. But all of those elements together, we kind of, if you can imagine, in this blue velvet bag with a gold string around it, become cemented as your DNA and enable you to have a simple enough tool to be able to remember, but has the richness to really define unique character for every brand.
Yeah, and I really love the analogy. I'm a huge fan of analogies, just to really give you context and meaning. And yes, the brand strategy is a map, but you know, directions change and markets change, and you know what is on point for us today might not be on point for us in 10 years time. You know, there might be a different market segment that we want to go after, or the market might evolve in a certain type of way. And I love that the brand DNA for you is that compass, that even if the map is not as clear today as it was 5 years ago, we still have our compass to realign with who we are and where we're going. So I absolutely love that DNA side of things, and I feel with these aspects of brand, you can really get buy-in from your clients, because if they believe in the brand DNA, then everything becomes much clearer. The map becomes much clearer. The destination becomes much clearer. Is that what you also found as well, working with clients, that the clearer they were on the DNA, the more invested they were on the rest of the brand strategy, or the rest of the brand?
Absolutely. And the process that we involved collaboration closely with the clients, so that we would do DNA development sessions like the intense pressure of a cauldron, that they took ownership in. And I'll come back to this. One of the tips, you know, for, you know, aspiring brand strategists out there, is there's no shortcut for doing your homework and a discovery report to get to that point of having that meeting. But when they take ownership in it, you end up you don't even have to sell it. I know a DNA is cemented when you start to try and change something and say, no, hands off it, Peter. You know, this is ours now, and we'll run with it. So, I mean, maybe I should give you a couple of examples of what we mean by DNAs and how profound you can actually impact. I mean, I've given this example before, Shangri-La, but I'll give you another couple as well. So, you know, Shangri-La came to us when we were in Hong Kong, and you know, I think they kind of came to us by mistake, because they knew we were we were a Guilo brand consultancy. That meant foreigner, and they were looking to expand their network out into North America. Funnily enough, Vancouver was the place they were looking at. So they thought, you know, they needed to compete with the likes of the Hiltons and the Ritz-Carltons, and you know, they were thinking, you know, we need to, you know, emulate this, you know, heavy blue marble and brass, masculine kind of American kind of experience, and maybe you can help us integrate our brand into this, and you know, we need to freshen our brand up anyway. So we went through the process, you know, the discovery process of you know, identifying, asking all the right questions about, you know, where they fit, what their role was, you know, how they were different, you know, standard things that come back to actually answering the DNA questions. What is your promise? How do you dress? How do you present yourself? What is your your opportunity? How do you differentiate yourselves from your competitors? And what opportunities are there for you to change? And it was very clear to us that they were far, far away from any kind of North American, masculine kind of positioning. They were, feminine, Asian, and what we ended up defining them as natural hosts. And part of their DNA was the spirit of it, which was an Asian Audrey Hepburn. And the minute that they had got that, everything came back and everything came home, and it was all about how do we interpret that in a way that people recognize. And it was fantastic Asian art, but it was traditional Asian values in a contemporary way. So it was cheongsams and tea ceremonies beside beautiful modern interiors. We'd keep the chandeliers, but they'd be modernized. And certain parts of the aspect, it went all the way through their organization. Of course, it had a profound impact on how they built out their hotel experience across the world. And it went much deeper than that, and it went into brand architecture and their 4-star, 5-star, 6-star, and things like that. So that was one. Another one is Canada's probably most famous, boys' school here, St. George's, which I've been working with for now, 10 or 12 years. And they came to us with it's classically, there's always a change. And this was an imminent change of headmaster and leadership and a classic 5-year cycle of strategy, which they needed to come up with. And we ended up articulating their DNA as building fine young men, one boy at a time. And that may not sound very profound, but when we started the journey, they were querying whether single gender education was relevant in a world where everything was going co-ed. They were questioning whether or not they still needed boarding, which they were struggling to compete against with some of the other island full boarding schools. So major fundamental issues. And having gone through a discovery and definition process, they realized that their soul was in not only being specialists, boys are us. That's what we know in the whole experience. We are experts in educating boys. We know that they need, kinesthetic energy, and they get up, they need more space to move. We have lower attention spans. We know that they are more heavily influenced by computers, all of those kind of things. And they own that positioning. So they've stuck with that for kind of 10 years and moving on. So, sorry, go on.
No. I love that. I love and this is the beauty of DNA, and this is where it becomes that tool for the true north is when you're crystal clear on exactly who you are as a brand, then the big decisions become so much easier to make, because you know who you are, you know where you're going, you know what you want to represent. And as I said, the smaller decisions just become so much easier, and the bigger decisions become so much easier as well with that. So in terms of methods that you use to define DNA with your clients, can you give us an insight as to those methods?
Yeah. Well, we had a process, a trademark process. Everyone's got their own process, which we call the 4Ds process, within what we call brand-centered management. And if you remember, brand-centered management was putting your brand at the heart of everything your organization does and says. So if you articulate your desired brand DNA, what you want to stand for and why, and to whom, and you put that at the center of your organization, it drives everything from the corporate strategy to how you deal with your people, to the products and services you offer, to the experiences or how you communicate those experiences, and to the actual experiences of your stakeholders, which drives their perception. And then that comes all the way back to your DNA. So a lot of it still circulates around the DNA. And I always say it's all in your DNA. So how do we go about generating a DNA? We had this 4Ds process. The first D is discovery. The second is definition, defining your DNA. The third is direction, what you do with it to set strategic direction. And the fourth is delivery. I focus mainly on the first 2 Ds, discovery and definition. And discovery is doing the groundwork, homework. And we would work with big organizations that were spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on tailor-made quantitative research and the details of the numbers and statistical analysis, cluster analysis for their different groups and sizes and things like that. And it's all fine, but actually it wasn't giving the rich data of how people feel about the brand and how they were articulating the emotional side that really drove choice. And you can do a very effective, in fact, we recommend it always, you can get 75% of the way there with 25% of the effort if you do a well-structured qualitative interview project with key stakeholders within the brand. And you don't need to do many. 15 to 20 of the right people, and those are people who are kind of close to the brand, representing the different interest groups or segments, who really understand it and who've got a vested interest in seeing the brand succeed. And then we ask structured questions from general to specific in terms of setting the context. What springs to mind when I say UBT, or whatever? What springs to mind when I say AIA or AIG? What springs to mind? So you get, and it brings people right down to earth often, because you can be a multi-billion-dollar insurance company as it was then, and it's not the biggest thing on people's minds. It's what they live for every day and is totally consumed by. But they're one of many big insurance companies, and we consider you when we have to take out life insurance, which is kind of unpleasant anyway. Don't really want to talk about that with two or three others. And so it sets a context. And then once you're into the category, where do you stand relative to competitors? What is it your key opportunities are, key core strengths and weaknesses? How do you go about it culturally? How you are different? So it would give you a lot of rich insight. And we would have a semi-structured, discovery questionnaire that would guide them, but we would do it and we would interpret it and set that up to bring everybody up onto a level of real honesty and what we would call, courageous truth. So, we wouldn't be afraid to say truth in front of, truth the power. And so we would say, what is the overall category truth here? What are the conventions that you need to kind of break out of or be aware of? What's the underlying, customer truth or human truth within it? So you really get to the emotional side of it, and then combined within that, what's the consequential brand truth? That would be a kind of focused effort from the discovery report, and we would also open it up to questions. So this is where I go back to what I was talking about, brand being integrally linked with business and communication. We would have the best question at the end was the 3 wishes to change things for the better. What would you do? And so it invariably brings it back to business issues. So you asked about tools and tricks. So that would be the first thing. Do your homework. Do a great discovery process. You can shortcut it and in a cost-effective but rich way by doing in-depth qualitative interviews and interpreting them well. And of course, you back that up with other external, internet and desk research. You do your competitive reviews. You look at your current trends. You look at your consumers. You look inside the company. But it doesn't have to be rocket science. And I mean, so many of the great creative people that I work with were actually brilliant natural strategists. They're very good at boiling down to key things and focusing on it and not compromising. They're very good and natural empathizers with their customers. They're much better at putting their shoes or their feet into their customers' shoes generally. So this isn't something that shouldn't come naturally to people who've got the creative executional side skill, but are looking to move the next step to add strategy to it.
And I love that as well about distilling it down and drilling down to get to that meaning and to be uncompromising about staying on point and getting to the root of what the brand means. Because again, going back to what we said before, when you get buy-in for that, when you get the client being protective of the DNA that you have helped them to discover, that's when that, this is something that they truly believe in now. And now we have buy-in. Anything that we want to do from here becomes much easier because we're all pulling in the same direction, and they have this believability in the brand. With the years that you've spent working with the likes of Coke and McDonald's and BMW, what would you say now, reflecting back to all of those workshops that you did, all of those meetings with the stakeholders within the brand on defining the brand and making those big strategic decisions? What would you say are your most effective or your favorite brand strategy tools that you would still use to this day?
Yeah. And that's a great question. Well, obviously, we've been talking a lot about the brand DNA, and that's the heart. That's where I would really, go back to. Articulating that rich template of your role, your key beliefs, your overarching promise, your commitment, understanding the benefits you're delivering, so that you are customer oriented and capturing your spirit. Those elements allow enough simplicity to be able to be remembered, but enough complexity and diversity to make you completely unique. So that would be probably one of the most, powerful tools. And then working within this structured 4Ds process, so that you've got your discovery work. The definition is doing your brand DNA development workshop, so that you give your clients ownership and they take ownership of it, and then cascading it into direction. Your DNA becomes a kind of beacon to guide strategy, the key choices you make to bring your desired future state to life. So, it informs strategic frameworks. And again, there's so many models of strategic frameworks, but I like, the simple circular one where you boil down to 3 or 4 key pillars, and then, three strategic priorities within that. I'm a simple guy. And it's so easy to overcomplicate things. I have a rule of 3. I don't know why, but I can remember 3 things. If you have just now.
At the moment, you might have to trim that down in a few years.
I might have to trim it down right now. I'm getting old, mate. I tell you, the marbles are still just about holding on to 3. But actually, it takes a lot of courage and balls and confidence to be able to boil long lists down to 3 things. And whenever I face and I deal with CEOs at the highest level, and they come back with a long list of 10, 15, 20 things to do, I said, nobody's going to know where to look or what to do that. The old analogies of, at workshops I come and you throw 3 tennis balls at somebody, they miss them all. You throw one hard at them, they can catch it, with one hand, their wrong hand, they're focused. So so the rule of 3 I use. And
look, for me, that is the center point of what we are employed to do for businesses. Is we're employed to simplify, not just for them first and foremost, but then for the market. And if you're not simplistic and focused, when sitting in the boardroom amongst the people who are leading the brand, well, then how then is the consumer going to understand what they should know about the brand? So I'm a 100% advocate for everything you just said there about that principle and that rule of simplicity. I think it stands us well for everything that we do in this industry, and I absolutely love it.
And it's amazing how lonely the CEOs at the top of these big companies are. And they just want the courage and the confidence and the reassurance. Not all of them, but many of them do. And always to have that focus. So you were asking for some anecdotes. You can tell when things are going wrong as well. Kodak used to be one of my clients, and I remember them coming to us, with hey, Peter, we've got this great new product. It's called Advantix. And this was in the age when, the digital imagery was just coming in, but it was there already. It was being captured. And the whiz-bang new product was just basically miniaturizing what they were doing already, so that you could preview the prints that you'd taken with your Kodak film in the back and in small scale, and cherry pick the picture you want. And it was a nudge improvement. But I said to them, look, digital is here. People are already storing this on digital discs and digital floppy disks and hard disks at that time. But it's not the medium you're storing in, it's the mindset that you're owning. And we've given you the best thing you could ever have. Keep it with Kodak. People keep their most precious memories with Kodak. I said, it doesn't matter whether it's stored in this, that, and the other. And he said, Peter, I kind of agree with you, but you don't understand what our business model is. I said, well, tell me. And they said, well, basically, our model for the last 60 years, our cash cow, is selling silver nitrate products and chemicals for processing old-fashioned film. So they had a cash cow that was working against their dramatic innovation, and they couldn't turn it around fast enough. And of course, I could see the writing on the wall. People, it wouldn't matter whether or not it was keeping it with Kodak in a digital format or not. They don't keep it with Kodak anymore. It's gone. So you can be hindsight and all of that, but that was actually kind of quite visible.
Yeah.
So, I've given you a client I'm working with at the moment. I hope they won't mind me sharing. It's a healthcare authority within the University of British Columbia, the UBC Department of Orthopedics. So everything to do with musculoskeletal and bones, and it's a very complicated group. It's a huge organization. Quite politicized over here. The government is heavily involved in the national healthcare program. They must have 250 kind of senior people, physicians and surgeons within this group, and 8 different divisions. Everything from doing neurology to trauma if you break a leg, to pediatric for children's, for foot and ankle, for hip replacement, arthroscopy, and things like this. And they've all got their own little divisions. Over the last 70 years, they've kind of moved apart, and they were desperately needing something to pull themselves together, but struggling to find it. We went through that process and articulated DNA, and their encapsulating key thought that drives everything was the insight that actually mobility liberates. What they do is give people the freedom to live back the lives that they want to do, that they need to do for their work, and that they want to do. And if you've ever broken an ankle or twisted an ankle or a leg or whatever, and you've had to work on crutches, you suddenly realize just how debilitating it is.
Yeah.
So the thought for them was mobility for all, and that became their driving call and their promise and their vision, and that unites everybody. And it sounds simplistic, but they weren't there. They haven't got that rallying cry, and they're just starting off on that journey to align themselves behind that.
Yeah, and again, like that believability, that certainty of knowing, why they're here, and that rallying cry that everybody can get around. Getting to the bottom of that is so hugely valuable for brand leadership teams and professional brand builders who are earning their living in this space. If you're able to get to that center and help your clients to find that key, then they won't question the money that they're spending on you, because the believability that they will have on the back of that is worth far more than what they're paying you for your fee. So I absolutely love that. And look, you've given us quite a lot of hands-on, realistic, applicable tools that you use with these brands, and for the listeners at the moment, Peter's been kind enough to send his book Dim Sum Strategy to me. It's on a race between that and Nelson Mandela, which I've also ordered. Whichever arrives first is gonna be my next book. So it's Peter against Nelson. But for the listeners, why don't you tell us a bit about the goodness that we can find inside Dim Sum Strategy, and then where we can go and find that book?
No, that's super kind, thanks. And to even be mentioned in the same breath as Nelson Mandela, I tell you, he was a brilliant brand expert. He's got probably the best personal brand in the world. But his book's got a lot of prison in it, mate. I mean, go to mine one first.
Okay, it might be. I know they're bite sized, and that hence the name Dim Sum.
He's brilliant, actually, and I have read a bit of some of his books, and you learn where he formed his brand from some of the early ceremonies that he had to go through from to move into manhood and all of the things, and
don't ruin it for me.
And I will give you some spoilers, but there's some very wincy little bits at the beginning. But you were earlier saying, thank you so much on the dim sum strategy thing, and you were asking about what other tools can be helpful, and other ones. And another good one that is in the book was the 4D. So after you've set your direction, delivery is the fourth component. And this is where so many people go wrong as well, because as agencies, you kind of think, well, we've got to do this and this and this and this and control it. We can do it. It's not. The whole delivery thing is, how do you do that in collaboration with other strategic partners? How do you accelerate that dramatically? So you spud it out and you simultaneously execute in areas of specialization at the same time, so that your DNA and your strategy is lived simultaneously. You're not doing all the executing, neither is your direct client. It's all about empowering their internal teams and bringing in the external supplier partners to be able to bring your vision to life in an accelerated and dramatic fashion. So the tool we used for that, to simplify that, was what we used to call the delivery donut.
Okay.
We like food analogies. So we had, if you can imagine this circular kind of image, it has the brand DNA in its little golden orb in the middle, which is defining your promise. And that promise still has to be kind of, relevant and credible, and differentiating and compelling. It has to interest people. If you've got all of those things, you're going to build a successful brand. So you've got that golden orb in the middle. And then if you can imagine an outer circle that was split, upper half and lower half, with 6 kind of cheeses. If anyone's old enough to, remember having played Trivial Pursuit, it was like one of those cheeses with those 6 cheeses in. And the top bit was what you do. So it was your products and services, it was your people, and it was your systems, which often people get. Systems are enablers or hinders of being able to deliver the products and services through the people to be able to deliver your experience. So we had actually, system experts who would come in and identify bottlenecks in service processes for hotels and for fitness and clients that we'd work with, and be able to solve them. I mean, you think, my gosh, you're a brand strategist. What are you doing, analysis of where bottlenecks are in the policies and procedures and governance of particular organizations. And we wouldn't do that, but we would know that that's what they needed, and we'd hire the specialists to be able to come in and solve that bottleneck problem. Similarly with people, we weren't HR specialists, and we didn't want to be, but we did know the right questions, and we did know what was required to be able to interpret a DNA and cascade it through an organization and translate it not from just words, but into action. Similarly, in terms of products and services, your DNA would inform new product development. So is it actually meeting your DNA? Is this the desired outcome going to be met by this? It was a criteria for assessment, and also a brief for directing. So that was the top half of the donut. And then the bottom half was what you say through internal communications first. If you don't drive and compel and convince your own people, how do you expect to do your stakeholders? External communications, and then the whole area of what we would call design, which was not just imagery but ideas and execution. And then the outer ring of that was your perceptions within your customers or your stakeholder base, which was your check and balance. Having done all of those, how are they feeling about it? What are their perceptions? Have you achieved what you were trying to do, this desired perception? So that's the delivery donut. But the book, Dim Sum Strategy, I mean, the name is a kind of giveaway. It's it basically shares 40 or 50 of the best creative strategic thinking tools that I've used the last 30 years of doing brand strategy consulting and advertising, across all of those big raft of blue chip clients, but also some of the smaller clients as well. And I was working here in Vancouver with a great company called Blue Man, and they were basically selling men's hair care products online through YouTube. Very young group. The CEO was 24. They were already turning over 2 or 3 million, and they were super smart, well read, and knew the theory, but were still getting to that point of just not quite knowing losing sight of who they were
Mm-hmm.
and where they were going, because they had so many opportunities to be able to expand into this. And we were lucky to kind of find each other at the right time. And they were, Gen Zers. Not that I'm labeling all Gen Zers like this, but small attention spans. Give it to us quick, Peter. And if we're interested, we'll go further. And what amazed me was that they were very, very bright, but they were missing some incredibly powerful tools that had been effective tools and around for 30 years that just lifted the mist for them and illuminated things. And when I shared them with them, they said, "Oh my God, how did we not know about this? How can we not do this?" And so I thought, okay, time to put this all down in the book. And I should have written the book of the brand company 10 years ago. So that's basically what it is. It's a combination of book of the brand company, what brand-centered management was, the 4Ds process, how to build your DNA, and littered and peppered with these creative and strategic thinking tools in bite-sized chunks. So
I absolutely love that, like tools in bite-sized chunks that you can then go off and develop, because at the end of the day, we're all creative people as well, and we all work with different types of clients. So one strategy over here can be developed out into something else. So I absolutely love that. I'm really looking forward to receiving my copy. Where can people go to get a copy for themselves?
Oh, that's really kind. I mean, there's an Amazon link. That's the best place for it.
I'll drop it in the show notes. I'll include it in the book. So anybody, if you're listening to this on audio, you can go and search on Amazon for Dim Sum Strategy, or if you're reading this on the article, you can hit the link, or if you're watching it on YouTube, you can hit the link and grab that book. But Peter, it's been an absolute pleasure. You've given us some great tools to walk away with. You've also given us some great anecdotes about working with those big brands and big moments. I love that Kodak story as well, because it's a story that I'm very, very familiar with in terms of those strategic decisions there. But having that story from you with your feet on the ground there just brings it more to life for me. So thank you so much for taking the time to share all your vast knowledge and experience with us. And again, I'm really looking forward to receiving your book, and I'll let you know how I go compared to Nelson Mandela.
Okay, I'm sure I'm going to be found wanting, Stephen. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm not sure I've given as much. I feel there's so much more to share still, always, but hopefully there's something of interest there for your listeners.
100%. I can tell you from experience, there will be a ton of notes taken from a ton of people from this episode. So on their behalf as well, thank you so much.
We really hope you enjoyed today's episode. Thanks so much for listening. If you want to learn more brand strategy techniques to level up your skills, make sure you check out brandmasteracademy.com. There's plenty of free resources and premium content for you to download and get you going. If you'd like to join our Facebook group full of like-minded brand strategists, all learning from each other, then find us by searching for the Brand Strategy Community, where you can find exclusive content for members as well. If you enjoyed this content, please be sure to give us an honest review on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you listened, and make sure you tune in for the next episode of the Brandmaster Podcast.